Module 7: The Importance of Tone. In your role as leader or manager, you will often find yourself in situations where you have to perform well even when you are not at your best. One truth about effective leadership is that when things go right, you will want to deflect the praise of your team members, but when things go wrong, it's all your fault. This can put you under constant pressure, and some of your more socially conscious and astute employees might recognize this fact, but most won't. Nevertheless, employees and supervisors can forgive much when you approach them with the right tone. Lighting a fire. You will often find yourself in a position where you need to get your employees energized and motivated to work hard and enthusiastically. One who has adopted the rule through fear paradigm will consider this the time to become forceful and aggressive, but this can frequently backfire. Instead, an effective leader uses inspiration and positivity to harness enthusiasm in employees. Lighting a fire isn't akin to burning down the house so much as shining a light to guide your employees. Here are some suggestions for increasing employees' enthusiasm. Share inspiring quotes, speeches, or ideas. While the movie The Wolf of Wall Street is not a great example of ethical leadership, it does give a good idea of how powerfully inspiration can foster enthusiasm in employees. This is why coaches in professional sports like to give the win one for the Gipper style speeches. Use upbeat music to get people going. Music that has a good beat and makes people want to dance also helps to instill enthusiasm and a kind of esprit de corps. Celebrate group and individual successes in order to foster a positive and forward-looking morale. Calming a storm. If you're successfully engaging your employees, it is inevitable that small conflicts will arise. While it might be tempting to see these conflicts as a negative, and in truth, if they are allowed to rage out of control, they will have negative effects, the fact that people are engaged enough to get angry or tense shows that they are employing their creative energies, and that's a positive. However, when tempers flare, it takes a calm leader to be the eye of the storm and channel that energy in positive ways, or calm it so that employees can function productively. Here are some suggestions. Always address conflicts from a place of calm. You may have to take a time out or allow others to take a time out from their own anger. Try to do so from a place of empathy and understanding. Avoid calling out employees in front of others. For example, when two employees are in conflict with each other, send one of them on a break, while you discuss the situation with the other. Be sure and give each employee the chance to tell their side of the conflict and make sure you listen more than you talk. When you speak to your employees about conflicts, make sure you are specific and that you address the issue in terms of behavior and not in terms of the employee's character traits. Discuss how the conflict affects the rest of your team, but avoid doing so with an accusatory tone. Allow employees to give you their understanding of what caused the conflict rather than identifying the cause yourself. Additionally, allow employees to suggest solutions for resolving the conflict. If necessary and appropriate, act as a mediator between two employees who have had a conflict with each other. However, when doing so, make sure everyone can address each other from a place of calm. Allow everyone involved to agree upon the appropriate action to take in order to restore the peace. Most importantly, communicate from a place of mutual respect for all parties involved. Often in the aftermath of a conflict, the parties involved may feel either embarrassment or they may feel resentment towards the other parties involved. Help to restore the sense of mutual respect by treating all parties with the same degree of respect, regardless of any perception of their level of fault or culpability in the conflict. Adult versus parent. One idea that comes to us from the psychological approach of transactional analysis is that when people interact with each other, they tend to slip into pre-formed scripts based on how they have experienced authority from authority figures when they were children. These scripts can frequently allow people to engage in escalating behaviors that create vicious cycles of conflict. Transactional analysis recognizes three primary styles of behavior in social interactions. Child. A person's need to escape responsibility can cause them to slip into child mode, where they can act dismissive and rebellious. People operating in child mode often dismiss other people's criticisms and maintain an attitude they are going to do what they want regardless of how others feel. Parents. When someone feels a need to assert control over a situation, often in a case where they feel powerless, they may slip into parent mode. From the sound of it, you might think this is an example of where someone has adopted the voice of reason, but more often than not, it is the voice of authority and not a very reasonable authority at that. If you have ever experienced someone talking to you as if you were a child, that person was most likely operating in parent mode. Adult. The ideal mode to operate in is adult mode. Those who operate from this mode are concerned with reality as it is, rather than disregarding reality like someone might do who is operating in child mode, or trying to control reality like someone operating in parent mode.
Heath, expecting a report from Alex, emailed him asking about his progress. Alex replied in an email, "Quit badgering me. I'll finish it when I'm ready to." Alex's childish response angered Heath, but he decided not to react in anger. He did not reply to Alex's email until he had calmed down. He asked Alex to meet with him and asked if anything was wrong. Alex told him that he had misunderstood the tone of Heath's email. Alex thought that Heath was upset with him for not having the report finished. Working together, they found that Alex could be more efficient with his time. A week later, Alex seemed less stressed out and more efficient.
Module 8, Trusting Your Team. When you lead others, you will find that they will rise and fall to the expectations you set for them. If you trust your team and act to be worthy of their trust, they will strive to be worthy of your trust. Dangers of micromanaging. One of the most difficult habits to keep under control when leading others is the tendency to micromanage. As someone who has had a great deal of responsibility within the company, as well as being emotionally invested, it is tempting to try and do it all yourself. However, micromanaging, even for the most tireless of managers, is the kiss of death in being an effective leader. The dangers of micromanaging are manifold. Your employees will come to resent always having you looking over their shoulder, which can undermine whatever other positive qualities you have going for you as a manager. Another tragic consequence of micromanaging is that you stunt your employees' growth. In order for each employee to become the best they can be, you have to encourage them to find their own way. Sometimes they may not do something in the same way that you would, and your standing aside may result in their failure. Keep in mind, however, that failure is often a prelude to success. Allowing an employee to make a mistake is akin to allowing that employee to grow and become better. Here are some suggestions to help you avoid the temptation to micromanage. Develop a rule where employees cannot come to you with a problem unless they have also thought of 2 solutions to that problem. While having an open-door policy is helpful in building a rapport with your employees, and it is useful in serving the needs of your employees, you must consider how useful you are being to those employees if you stand in the way of their growth. Consider limiting your employees' access to you in some ways. One possibility is to allow a certain time of day for open access, while other times of day are reserved for appointment only. A third suggestion is to resist the urge to jump in at any sign of difficulty. Instead, count slowly to 10 and consider whether this is one of those times where your help is truly necessary versus one of those times where in helping your employees, you are actually hurting them. Delegation and anxiety. What frequently stops us from delegating responsibilities to our employees is a fear that they may fail us. However, this distrust of our employees can be more damaging than failure itself. Living in fear keeps our lives in holding patterns, and we never grow or allow others to grow. There is no reason to be afraid of failure because it is inevitable. If, however, we are able to view failure as a learning opportunity, then we can become comfortable with the idea and learn to take risks. Here are some suggestions to help you manage your trepidation about delegation. Write down your concerns rather than voicing them or allowing them to swirl in your head. This can help to ventilate anxieties. Manage your stress levels through exercise. When you do this regularly, you will tend to feel better physically, which gives emotions such as anxiety less room to take hold. Meditate regularly to practice staying in the present. Worry is a future-oriented activity, but one over which you have little control. Appreciate and celebrate healthy progress over perfection. Our notion of a perfect situation, a perfectly performed task, or any other number of perfect things that we can imagine is actually a linguistic construction. Actual perfection is something that is completely beyond our control. Learn to recognize and counteract magnification, a distorted thinking pattern where you imagine the worst possibility as the most likely possibility. Often, when you feel in the grips of an arousal emotion such as anxiety, you tend to think in shorthand and images rather than in complete sentences. Identifying this shorthand, converting it into complete sentences, and investigating the logic of that can help lessen your feeling of anxiety. For example, when you delegate an important task to an employee, your anxiety over the situation might prompt shorthand thoughts such as failure, disaster, poorhouse. Translating this into a complete sentence might look like, if my employee fails, I will be blamed for the worst possible disaster that can occur at this company. Then I will be fired and go to the poorhouse. Now that you have translated the shorthand into a complete sentence, ask yourself if you would truly be fired over this. Often, you wouldn't have the level of responsibility you would have if your bosses were going to be so quick to fire you. Aces in their places. One more aspect of delegation can help limit your anxiety. You must delegate in a proper manner. Delegating tasks blindly or randomly can turn disastrous if the person you have delegated a task to is not suited to that task. Fortunately, one reward of getting to know your employees is that you can gain an idea of what each employee excels at. By tailoring the tasks you delegate to your employees' strengths, you put them in a better position to succeed. And their success is ultimately your success, even if you will inevitably give them all the credit. By putting your aces in their places, you also foster a sense of belonging and importance to each member of your team. If an employee knows that he or she is in that role because you handpicked them for it, this will pay huge dividends in that person's own confidence, which helps to maximize her or his performance. Celebrating success. In order to get the most out of your employees, it is helpful to foster a culture of mutual celebration of success, and no success is too small to escape such celebration. Take time out to recognize a job well done, and you will encourage additional successes. Cultivating certain emotions in your employees, such as enthusiasm, optimism, confidence, and tenacity, will help them to perform better and enjoy further successes.
Teresa had been very good at her job before being promoted to project coordinator. In her new role, she found it hard to let Harrison do her old job. She was always hovering over Harrison, which would make him nervous and prone to mistakes. He asked if he could try working on the project alone. Teresa agreed, but was still nervous. She took a deep breath, counted to 10, and decided to let Harrison handle it. He finished up his initial strategy paper for the project and brought it to Teresa. When she saw it, she realized Harrison was very talented and made a point to praise his work in front of the other team members.
Module 9: Earning the Trust of Your Team. Avoiding micromanagement, delegating tasks properly, and celebrating successes are all ways to increase your high regard and trust for your team. But trust is a two-way street. An effective leader is one whom the followers will trust implicitly. Trust, like respect, does not come automatically. Some people may be naturally inclined to trust people, but the degree of trust you need to lead effectively must be earned. Honesty. The most important way to earn trust is to consistently be honest. This can even be helpful when admitting you are wrong or that you don't know the answer. Employees will respect someone who can admit vulnerability more than someone who tries to hide behind a veneer of perfection. Lying to your employees, buttering them up with fake sentiment, or taking credit for their successes are quick ways to make them distrust you. Once employees distrust you, your ability to lead them effectively becomes nearly impossible. However, honesty should never be used as a weapon. You may occasionally have to tell an employee how it is, but this is exactly where considerations of tone and intent become vitally important. Reliability. In addition to being honest, an effective leader will earn trust by being reliable in everything she or he does. Conversely, if you prove unreliable, employees will not trust you. This makes it vital to follow through on everything you say. If you indicate that there is a boundary that employees should not cross, you must address it when that boundary is crossed, even if it is with a mild response such as, "Don't do that again." If you say you will give an employee certain requested time off, then you must accomplish this. If you tell an employee you will follow up, then it is vital to follow up. Being reliable also means being consistent. Ignoring one employee's misdeeds or successes is as bad as ignoring every employee's successes or misdeeds. In some ways, it is even worse because it can communicate a sense of favoritism. The level of pressure and the amount of work you have before you may make it impossible to meet every one of your commitments. However, you can lessen this reality through adopting the following suggestions. Keep a well-organized planner, either a calendar or some sort of organizing system where you can write down your commitments. Make a point to acknowledge your receipt of employees' requests in writing, but also remind employees that you must have requests in writing as well. Don't overpromise and underdeliver. If you aren't sure if you can award time off, don't tell the employee that you can. One of the most important things you can tell an employee, and yet one of the most difficult, is that you don't know or you are not sure. While you may fear that this will undermine your employee's confidence in you, you can counter this with a statement that you will find out. Make sure that you follow up, however, if you do make that promise. If you find that you are unable to meet a previous obligation you made, make sure that you inform the other person as soon as possible. Sometimes an emergency can come up or the situation can change. You don't need to offer a full explanation most of the time, although in some cases it may be necessary and appreciated. but you do need to let the other person know as soon as you know. If you have a meeting with an employee scheduled, try at that point to reschedule it. Availability. Making yourself available to your employees is another vital aspect of building trust. This can be tricky, however, and you have to use good judgment in determining how available you need to make yourself in order to avoid micromanaging. Nevertheless, you should always allow some time where employees can approach you. If an employee feels you are unapproachable or feels intimidated by you, it can create a situation where you are the last to know about something important going on. While you want to encourage employees to not over-rely upon you, you also want employees to feel that they can come to you when they need to. Striking the correct balance can take time and can vary from employee to employee. Some employees may develop better confidence in themselves by being left to their own devices. Others, particularly new employees, might need your presence a bit more, but it's best to think of yourself in this situation as being like training wheels on a bicycle. At some point, the training wheels need to come off. Even then, however, your employees will trust you more knowing that you will figuratively catch them if they fall by being supportive and constructive. Openness. It may seem as if openness is the same thing as honesty, but there is a bit more to it. Being open is a twofold characteristic. On the one hand, you want to be upfront about your vision for your team, your plan for their success, and even when appropriate, what changes may be in store. Sometimes you may be in a position of knowing something that's going to happen, and the circumstances won't allow you to inform your employees. However, if employees sense that something is about to happen, this can produce anxiety. Since changes in work can affect a person's livelihood, this anxiety cannot be overlooked or dismissed. Try to engage in empathy about the effect of keeping information from your employees. This can get tricky when trying to strike a balance between the needs of your employees and your bosses. But if you are operating from your own personal mission statement and using your own core values, then making tough decisions can actually be emotionally rewarding in that you get an opportunity to make a decision that you can be proud of. The other aspect of openness is being open to employees' feedback and criticism. They may not always be correct in their criticism or concerns, but respecting your employees means giving them a fair hearing. When someone comes to you with a problem with what you are doing or how you are doing things, listen carefully. If you feel yourself getting angry or defensive, it's possible that the employee has struck a nerve. You may not be in a place where you can immediately acknowledge the employee's criticism. If that's the case, schedule a follow-up that will allow you time to assess your employee's concerns and what you can do about it. Recent studies have found that people appreciate vulnerability in others far more than an appearance of perfection or invincibility. So don't be afraid to admit when you are wrong or mistaken. This can actually make you a more respected and effective leader than if you demand respect by never apologizing or acknowledging your mistakes.
Darla had received a request from Sarah for a week off in January so that Sarah could visit her family in India. She told Sarah that she would know soon so she could book her flights. Darla's supervisor denied the request. Before contacting Sarah, Darla looked through Sarah's personal files and saw that she had never taken a vacation since she started. Darla sent an email to her supervisor asking if she could address the issue directly. Darla let Sarah know that the request had been denied, but she was going to try to get that changed. Darla presented Sarah's case to her supervisor personally and got approval. She emailed Sarah to let her know.
Module 10, Building and Reinforcing Your Team. Teams don't immediately come together and experience success overnight. In fact, it takes a good leader to work at turning a group of people into an effective team. This module explores the various aspects of building and improving your team. Identifying team strengths and weaknesses. One of the most important activities that you will need to engage in as a leader is constantly assessing the state of your team, each individual employee, and yourself. Before you can put employees in positions to succeed, you have to have a good idea of what their strengths and weaknesses are. Here are some guidelines for how to assess team and team member strengths and weaknesses. Include other team members in the assessment process. Allow each member of the team a chance to identify both his or her and other team members' strengths and weaknesses. Ideally, this can be done privately so that no team member develops resentment towards another for perceived unwarranted criticism. This also allows you to compare your assessment with others. When an employee or the entire team experiences a failure or a success, try to identify why this came about and who was most responsible. In the case of failure, identifying the responsible person is not about casting blame, but it is about identifying what went wrong so you know where and how to improve. When you are analyzing a success, however, it is good to give credit when someone, other than yourself, was particularly instrumental in that success. Determine how consistently an employee performs in a given role. If that employee is consistently unsuccessful, try to find another opportunity and role for that employee to be successful. Identify the skills necessary for success in certain roles, and when an employee is consistently successful in a role, note these skills as part of that employee's skill set. If an employee fails to perform consistently, you may also identify these skills as weaknesses in that particular employee. Observe employees when they act alone or outside of the team structure in order to determine how their strengths and weaknesses might change in different contexts. Perhaps it is not a lack of a particular skill that is the weakness, but an inability to apply that skill in a team setting, or vice versa. Identify team roles. Dr. Meredith Belbin identifies 9 team roles that can help make up a balanced and effective team. The plant. The plant is the highly creative and unconventional member of a team. They tend to be strong in thinking outside the box, but their primary weakness is a tendency to be forgetful. The monitor evaluator, ME. This person is good at providing a logical and dispassionate view of the range of decisions before a team. They tend to have difficulties with being overly critical and slow-moving. The coordinator, CO. This employee, often it will be you, helps the team to focus on goals and to delegate work effectively. They tend to either over-delegate or under-delegate and end up micromanaging. The resource investigator, RI. This employee will tend to understand how your team's work can best translate to the rest of the world. They will be good at understanding the competition and developing connections with others outside and inside the team framework. But they can have difficulties with following up on or getting in-depth information. The implementer. This role involves someone who is good at taking theory and putting it into practice. They try to find strategies on how to make an idea work in the most efficient manner. Implementers have difficulty considering alternative approaches and may be slow to give up on a favorite idea. Completer finishers. These team members excel at the end of a task. They make sure everything is functioning ideally. These employees act as a kind of quality control. Their strength, having high standards, can also be their weakness, in that they tend to be perfectionists. Team workers, TW. These employees are really good at smoothing over the tensions and difficulties that come up when people are working hard on creative endeavors. They excel at working and playing with others, but they can be indecisive when it comes time to make team decisions about the best course of action. Shapers. These employees act as a kind of engine for the team. They can effectively get others going and create momentum. Typically, shapers are highly driven and enthusiastic individuals. Their weakness tends to be overly aggressive and temperamental in their desire to get the team's work done. The specialist. The specialist of the group might only know how to do one thing, but he or she is an expert at it. Their focus is narrow and in-depth, which can be both their strength and their weakness. An ideal team will be balanced with all 9 roles being expressed. Since many teams are smaller than 9 people, you may find that different team members excel at multiple roles. When you identify a key strength in one of your employees, for example, an employee who is highly energetic, then you can help them fulfill one or more roles on your team. The energetic employee, for example, might be good at being sharper as well as being a resource investigator. Someone who is highly critical can either be a completer finisher or a monitor evaluator, or both. Design exercises with specific goals. Often you may want to give team members a break from working on their normal projects to meet as a team and improve team morale or functioning. Sometimes getting a team together for a meeting or a team-building activity can actually be an exercise in futility. In order to use meetings and team-building exercises effectively, it is helpful to have specific goals in mind, to identify those goals to your team members and to follow up. For example, doing a trust-building exercise after a time when team members were at each other's throats is helpful. But if you only do the trust-building exercise the one time, after a while team members may forget the point or lose the benefits they gained from engaging in the exercise the one time. When planning a meeting, for instance, identify why the meeting is necessary and plan an agenda to keep the meeting organized. Sometimes the necessity is quite simple. For example, scheduling time for team members to play together can help them to recharge after a particularly grueling project. It can also help them build more of a rapport with each other. Having specific goals for an activity does not preclude having an activity achieve multiple goals. What to avoid. When planning team building exercises, make sure that you don't undermine your attempt to improve your team. Here are some suggestions of what to avoid in team building. Make sure that your team building goals are relevant to your team's needs so that they are worth taking regular time away from other work to improve. Make sure that your team building activities are not simply one-time affairs, but that they are consistently worked on to reinforce your goals for the exercise. While athletics can be fun for many employees, they can also be destructive towards building team morale, especially if they are focused simply on competition and winning. If you use team building exercises, try to incorporate them more frequently than once or twice a year. Incorporating these exercises monthly or weekly helps to reinforce your goals.
Gus reviewed his employees' records regarding the previous project. He found that Marcus was skilled at meeting with clients from another company and getting information on their projects. Gus was starting a new project, as was another company, and he needed Marcus to find out what he could. Gus let Marcus off of work early so he could get to the local hangout. Marcus found out that the rival company was slow to get the project running. Knowing this, Gus hustled his team into action. A month later, after successful completion of a project that would mean millions for the company, Gus took a moment to specifically single out Marcus's good job.
Module 11, You Are the Boss of You. We've reached the point in this course where you can understand all the ins and outs of leading others. However, if you cannot lead yourself effectively, then you will never be able to get others to follow you. The most important habit that effective people can have, whether they lead others or not, is to be proactive. Think of proactive as the opposite of reactive. Instead of having the world act upon you, you take action to make yourself into the kind of leader anyone would follow. What kind of person would you follow? If you have been working on your mission statement and identifying your core values, this question is probably not too difficult to answer. If you understand what you value in both yourself and in others, then you can work at shaping yourself into that kind of leader. Keep in mind that developing into the kind of leader that you would follow involves constantly reassessing where you are at in terms of your values, your goals, and your overall mission. The further you go down the path of leadership, the more necessary it becomes to refine your skills and improve yourself. This requires both detachment and self-honesty. Being detached means that you are able to dispassionately observe where you are strong and where you are weak. Self-honesty is the capacity to identify personal strengths and weaknesses. Self-awareness. In order to be an effective employee, an effective leader, and an effective person, you must have the capacity to reflect and be aware of yourself. Being self-aware involves multiple dimensions of the self. Taking care of physical needs through exercise and maintaining a good diet are factors in being aware of your physical self. Disciplining your mind through meditation that allows you to manage your emotions effectively is an example of developing your emotional and psychological awareness. You also want to have a good idea of the big picture. Are you satisfied with where you are and where you are going? Imagine once again that you were at your funeral. How would you imagine the things people have to say about you would square with your life's goals and your mission statement? Self-improvement. Self-improvement is a long-term game, but as you work continuously on improving yourself, it is important to keep certain pitfalls in mind. Navel-gazing can occur when you become overly focused on yourself. This means that you become self-absorbed and self-centered. Another pitfall of working to improve yourself constantly is that you can become overly convinced of your own self-importance. Finally, if you are always working to improve yourself, you may find that you have gotten stuck in the sense that you are never good enough. A better way to frame this is to think that where you are is always good, but that there is also always room for improvement. When you find yourself excessively self-oriented, this is a sign that you need to deepen your humility and refocus on serving others. Here are some ways to help you foster a greater sense of humility. Allow others to be first and foremost. Insisting on being the first in line, the first to raise your hand in a class, the first to get the parking spot, and so on, has a tendency to inflate one's sense of self-importance. However, when you allow others to have the spotlight or be first, it gives you a better vantage point to appreciate their gifts and what they are able to bring to the table. And when you can do this, you actually find yourself in a better position to lead others because you understand how they can best contribute. Don't insist on being right. Nobody likes to be wrong, including other people. When you are wrong, it puts you in a vulnerable position, which can be scary. However, vulnerability is often what makes a person beautiful and appreciable. Allowing others the legitimacy of their beliefs without correction from you is a charitable act. Listen to what other people think more than telling them what you think. Dale Carnegie once said that the sweetest sound to anyone is the sound of their own voice. Really paying attention to what other people have to say without having to correct or undermine them helps you to stay oriented outward rather than being self-absorbed. Try not to judge others. An old saying goes like this: when you point a finger at someone else, you have 3 fingers pointing back at you. While it is tempting to judge another person to assess what they are doing and how they are doing it, when you do so, you are presuming that you know better. Unfortunately, unless you have lived the experiences of another person, you cannot know what is best for them. Your grasp on another person's situation will always be incomplete because you don't have the complete picture. Keeping your balance. Throughout the whole process of becoming a more effective leader and a more effective human being, 2 tools can help smooth the way. The first is developing a greater sense of gratitude. When you wake up in the morning or while you drink your coffee or eat breakfast, either write down in a notebook or type on your computer a list of 5 things for which you are grateful. If you keep this gratitude journal every day, it will have a cumulative effect on your keeping a positive outlook. The second tool's importance cannot be understated. No matter how much you have on your plate at any given time, it is important that you take the time to play. Whether this is a hobby such as painting or an activity such as playing video games, make a point of scheduling playtime for yourself at least 2 to 3 times a week. This will help you to balance out all the stress you have in your life.
Wayne, a team manager, considered justice and truth as core values of his. Wayne often insisted he was right, and it sometimes got him into conflicts. One day, he got into an argument with Sabrina, a longtime employee, over a sales report quote. He insisted he was right, and Sabrina got upset. Wayne dropped the subject, but was still worried. Sabrina had said he doesn't value her opinion. He hadn't listened to her clearly, and that even though his opinion about the report seemed right, she had a legitimate point. He contacted Sabrina and acknowledged her opinions and apologized. After hanging up the phone, Wendell added listening to others as a core value to his list.
Although this workshop is coming to a close, we hope that your journey to improve and apply the skills that you learned is just the beginning. Please take a moment to review and update your action plan. This will be a key tool to guiding your progress in the days, weeks, months, and years to come. We wish you the best of luck.